Hello, my name is George Steele, and today I would like to introduce to you a rubric that I developed to help start the conversation about advising program assessment. I developed this rubric initially as an assignment for a NACADA e-tutorial I was developing. However, I realized I had too many activities for that week and that it was overloaded, so I took it out of the e-tutorial and parked it on a shelf. Over a year ago, I was honored to be selected as a fellow for the Excellence in Academic Advising program, a joint effort by NACADA and the Gardner Institute. The role of fellow in the program was to provide guidance to participating institutions as they use the EAA model to conduct evidence-based academic advising program assessment. More can be read about this excellent program on the NACADA website with this URL. It was during this time that I had conversations with other fellows in the program about how to get the conversation started about program assessment. It was then that I recalled that I created this rubric and it was designed to do exactly what we were seeking. I shared this rubric with three of the fellows. To validate its effectiveness, all three wanted to try it at their institutions first. The three fellows were Dr. Kim Smith from Virginia Tech, Casey Sell from Arizona State University, Dr. Sean Bridgen, who at the time was working at the University of Pittsburgh. Sean recently began work at the NACADA executive offices, so his role at Pitt has been ably filled on an acting basis by Rachel Ann Parks. The rubric was developed using one of NACADA's pillars of academic advising, the concept of advising. The concept of advising was selected because it represents best the proposition that the purpose of academic advising is a teaching and learning activity. The concept of advising is made up of three main components: learning outcomes to provide intentionality to advising, and identifying the learning goals and the type of evidence students should produce to demonstrate their learning. An advising curriculum that organizes the learning outcomes based upon curricular instructional techniques of scope, sequence, and scaffolding, and the pedagogical focus of using and engaging students in critical thinking. Combined, these three can guide us through the development of how an advising program should be structured for its interactions with students, and in turn become a critical source for advising program assessment. To explain the importance of learning outcomes and how the rubric can help start the conversation, Dr. Kim Smith from Virginia Tech will share with us her thoughts.
And as you all know, there are many advising units now who are starting to adopt a learner-centered advising philosophy. And so with this framework, it's very helpful to develop specific learning objectives or goals for academic advising. Specifically, when I say learning outcomes, I'm talking about what is it that we want our students to learn, to do, and to understand as a result of having participated in academic advising. So once we have those learning outcomes established, this really helps advisors to focus in on what it is they actually need to teach through their interactions with their students. As well, students need to know what it is they're supposed to learn through their interaction with an academic advisor. This rubric that we're using to evaluate academic advising includes a gradation that looks at assessing whether on one end of the continuum, whether there's no academic advising learning outcomes identified at all at a given institution, to the other end of the continuum, representing a well-integrated learning outcome philosophy that allows us to develop specific academic and career plans for all of our students. One example I will give you is that at Virginia Tech, we are pretty committed to, as an entire institution, we want all of our students to have developed an academic plan integrating both curricular aspects and co-curricular aspects by the end of their first semester of enrollment. And then what's most important about those learning outcomes is whether or not we have methods of evaluation that have been identified, because we really will not know if we're successful in helping students to learn these specific outcomes if we are not able to appropriately assess those established learning outcomes. And then again, once we have assessed them, we're continuing the learning process by feeding that information and feedback into the entire process.
Thank you, Kim. The power of developing an advising curriculum to focus on the advising program intentionality and responsibilities in a large decentralized college by aggregating student learning outcomes and arranging them in scope, sequence, and scaffolding across the student's experience is discussed by Casey Self from Arizona State University.
One of the things that we experienced in utilizing this rubric, and especially the section on advising curriculum, was even though we had a wide variety of perspectives on whether we had learning outcomes or whether we had an advising program and those types, most people were at the same level that agreed we did not have an advising curriculum. And so I think they recognize that while we have great things going on, we don't have an established process, an established plan, an established strategy to help advisors get the training and development and to get the experience they need to ultimately help students meet the student learning outcomes that we've identified that we want them to achieve at certain times. And so I think, you know, this being an educational process of people recognizing we're not there, we don't have a common plan, by going through the process that we're using this tool and also going through the process of admission and learning outcomes, people will be much more comfortable saying we do have a plan, we do have an advising curriculum that we can clearly communicate about what our roles are and what we're trying to do, and especially in my model in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and at what point in the student's career. Because since we now have a complete office that has focuses on first-year freshmen, first-year students, and then we have our academic units that focus on the sophomores, juniors, and seniors, we needed to identify what learning we wanted to take place at certain times. And this process and looking at the curriculum as a whole has really helped us identify the need to do that and be able to do it. And ultimately, it'll help us all understand what happens at what point throughout the student experience.
Thank you, Casey. The importance of making explicit the use of critical thinking in academic advising and how the rubric help raises this important issue is addressed by Rachel Ann Parks from the University of Pittsburgh.
This section helps us understand how the pedagogy of critical thinking is related to advising curriculum, outcomes, and student evaluation. So you can see on the left side of the slide that the lowest rating says that nothing is stated for critical thinking as the primary method of engaging students. It means that that's not built into your center. The second area, critical thinking, is stated but not related to the advising curriculum, learning outcomes, and student evaluation. So it's something that you talk about, but it's not built into the functions. In the third column, it's implied but not explicitly stated. And then finally, the strongest one is that this is explicitly stated and built into the fabric of your practice.
Thank you, Rachel. The last component of the rubric addresses the means of delivery of advising. This component is defined by the belief that the greater the possibility of increasing the availability of the advisee and advisor interactions, the greater the possibility that the quality of the interactions can be used to achieve the goals of the components defined by the concept of academic advising. This component of the rubric was developed based upon a study done by Fasnacht, McCormick, Nalos, and Riebers in 2017. In their study, these authors investigated over 200 diverse institutions and over 50,000 full-time first-year students. They found that the typical first-year student met with an academic advisor 1 to 3 times during their first college year. They also reported that the number of meetings varied across student subpopulations and institutional types. A brief overview of each element of the rubric is presented as follows. This topic of the rubric moves from left to right, with the left side describing less contact between advisees and advisors, to a description on the right highlighting multiple opportunities to have academic advising engagements across students' experiences from orientation to graduation. There are 3 videos included in this article. These videos focus on Kim's, Casey's, Sean's, and Rachel's use of the rubric at their respective institutions. I hope you enjoy watching them and gain insights as to how you might use this rubric to start the conversation at your institution, college, or department about academic advising program assessment.